Some people lose everything the moment they underestimate the wrong person. The automatic doors of Green Valley Pharmacy slid open with a soft hiss, letting in a burst of January wind sharp enough to sting the skin. Customers pulled coats tighter around their shoulders as they stepped inside, escaping the cold into rows of fluorescent light, polished tile, and the familiar scent of hand soap, paper bags, and fresh coffee from the corner kiosk. It was 5:42 p.m., the busiest part of the evening rush, when tired workers came for blood pressure refills, parents searched for cough syrup, and seniors waited patiently beside the prescription counter with numbers clutched in trembling hands. At Register 3, a young mother counted dollar bills. Near aisle 7, a teenage boy compared protein bars under the glow of a sales sign. And in the center of it all stood Mrs. Evelyn Brooks, 74 years old, 5'3", wrapped in a navy wool coat that had seen many winters, a knitted hat resting neatly over silver curls. She held a small pharmacy ticket between gloved fingers and waited with the calm patience of someone who had spent a lifetime learning that dignity often meant standing quietly while the world rushed past you. Her eyes moved toward the wall clock, then to the counter, then briefly to the bottle of water in her basket. Nothing about her asked for attention. Nothing about her invited suspicion. But some people don't need evidence. They only need prejudice. Officer Daniel Mercer entered through the front doors with the heavy stride of a man who believed every room improved when he walked into it. Tall, broad-shouldered, winter uniform pressed sharp, badge polished bright enough to catch the overhead lights. He scanned the store with the casual authority of someone used to being obeyed before he ever spoke. A radio clipped to his chest crackled once, then fell silent. The manager, Karen Lewis, hurried toward him, nervous hands twisting together. She leaned close, whispering something quick, her eyes darting toward the prescription line. Daniel followed her glance and locked onto Evelyn. He didn't ask questions. He didn't request details. He simply started walking. The conversations around the store softened one by one as customers noticed the uniform moving with purpose. Shoes clicked against tile. A cartwheel squeaked and then stopped. Even the pharmacist behind the counter looked up. Daniel halted in front of Evelyn so abruptly that her basket swung lightly at her side. "Ma'am," he said, voice loud enough for half the store to hear. "Step away from the counter." Evelyn blinked once. "Excuse me," she asked, gentle and clear. "You heard me." He extended a hand toward the basket. Now, a few phones lifted before anyone realized they had done it. Human instinct. Trouble always pulls a crowd. Evelyn looked around, not frightened, only confused. "Officer, I'm waiting for my heart medication," she said. "They texted me 20 minutes ago." Daniel's jaw tightened as if courtesy itself annoyed him. "You can explain that in a minute." He reached for the basket. A bottle of water rolled out and spun across the floor, tapping softly against a shelf of vitamins. Somewhere near the greeting cards, someone whispered, "What did she do?" Another voice answered, "Probably shoplifting." Funny how fast strangers become judges. Evelyn straightened slowly, one gloved hand resting on the handle of her cane. Her posture was small, but steady. "Young man," she said, "you are making a mistake." Daniel laughed once under his breath. "That's what they all say." The room tightened. The air itself seemed to hold still. Karen looked at the floor. The pharmacist froze mid-label. A child near the candy aisle stared openly, sensing what adults pretended not to see. Daniel reached for the cuffs at his belt, metal catching the light like a warning. Evelyn did not move. She did not plead. She did not raise her voice. She only lifted her eyes to the name stitched above his pocket. Mercer. She read it once, and something old and distant flickered across her face. Then she spoke so softly that people leaned forward to hear. "Mercer," she said, almost to herself. "I remember that name." The metal in Officer Mercer's hand never reached her wrists. It hovered there for a second, then lowered an inch as confusion crept across his face. He was a man accustomed to instant reactions, fear, apologies, excuses, anger, anything that confirmed he controlled the room. But Evelyn Brooks gave him none of it. She simply studied his name tag with the calm attention of someone reading an old address on a letter long forgotten. "You know me?" Mercer asked, trying to recover the edge in his voice. Evelyn adjusted one glove finger by finger, slow and deliberate. "No," she said softly, "but I knew your mother." The words landed in the pharmacy like a dropped glass. No crash, just silence. A young cashier stopped scanning cough drops mid-beep. The pharmacist behind the counter removed his glasses. Karen Lewis looked up so fast, she nearly lost her balance. Mercer straightened. My mother passed 3 years ago. I know, Evelyn replied. I sent flowers. He blinked once, then scoffed as if disbelief could erase discomfort. You expect me to believe that? She did not answer right away. Instead, she looked past him toward the fluorescent lights, her eyes carrying the weight of another room, another year, another winter. St. Matthew Medical Center, she said. February 12th. Snowstorm outside. Intensive care unit on the 4th floor. Your mother was waiting for a donor. Everyone said she did not have much time left. Mercer's fingers tightened around the cuffs. How would you know that? Because I was there too. A phone camera lifted higher from aisle 5. Another customer began recording from near the greeting cards. People no longer whispered about theft. They whispered about truth. Evelyn's voice never rose. It moved gently through the room, and somehow that made everyone listen harder. My husband, Walter Brooks, had a stroke that week. 68 years old. Retired mail carrier. Kind man. Loved jazz, peach cobbler, and church hats he bought me every Easter. Her eyes softened for one brief moment, then steadied again. He was registered as an organ donor. He always said if he could help someone after he was gone, then part of him was still doing good work. Mercer's jaw shifted, but no words came. The confidence that had filled him minutes ago now looked too heavy to carry. Karen covered her mouth with one hand. The pharmacist stared openly. Evelyn continued. Your mother received his heart at 2:17 in the morning. Even the refrigeration units seemed quieter. No, Mercer said at last, but the word lacked force. It sounded less like denial and more like hope. That is impossible. Is it? Evelyn asked. Your mother wrote me every Christmas for 9 years. Sent me pictures from family cookouts. Told me she walked 2 miles every morning after surgery. Told me she got to watch her son graduate the academy. Mercer's face changed, then not dramatically, but enough for everyone to see the ground shifting under him. How do you know that? He repeated, weaker now. Evelyn reached slowly into her coat pocket. Mercer instinctively stepped forward, then stopped himself. She pulled out a worn envelope, edges softened by time. The front bore old handwriting in blue ink. She held it carefully, like something breakable and sacred. Because I kept every letter. Karen began to cry quietly. Somewhere near the vitamins, a man muttered, Oh my God. Mercer stared at the envelope as if it might open on its own and speak. His badge still shined. His posture still looked official. But authority had already left him. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. Your mother thanked my family for giving her more years, she said. And today, you tried to place handcuffs on the widow of the man who gave them to her. No one moved. No one coughed. No one dared interrupt the kind of moment people recognize only while living through it. Then from the back of the store, a teenager holding a phone whispered the sentence everyone was thinking. He just ended himself. Officer Mercer looked around as if the room itself had betrayed him. Minutes earlier, every face had been turned toward Evelyn with suspicion. Now those same faces were fixed on him with something colder disappointment. It is a strange thing when power changes hands without a sound. No one had touched him. No one had shouted. Yet the uniform on his shoulders suddenly seemed too large, like a costume borrowed from a better man. Put the phones away, he said sharply, but his voice cracked at the edges. No one listened. The teenager near aisle 5 kept recording. A woman by the checkout lane stepped closer for a clearer angle. Someone else whispered the officer's name out loud, as if making sure the internet would spell it correctly. Karen Lewis finally found the courage she had misplaced 20 minutes earlier. She moved beside Evelyn, not in front of her, not behind her, beside her. Mrs. Brooks has been a customer here for 11 years, she said, hands trembling. She picks up prescriptions every month. We know her. Mercer turned toward Karen with the reflex of a man expecting obedience. Then why did you call me? Karen's eyes filled with shame. I said there was confusion at the counter. I did not say arrest anyone. Those words hit harder than anger would have. Mercer opened his mouth, then closed it again. Behind the pharmacy counter, the pharmacist stepped forward carrying a white paper bag with Evelyn's name printed neatly across the label. Her refill has been ready since 5:20, he said. Blood pressure medication and heart tablets. We texted her when it was complete. Evelyn accepted the bag with both hands. gentle as if receiving something precious. "Thank you, Martin," she said. Her composure never changed. That unsettled Mercer more than outrage ever could. If she had yelled, he could have dismissed her as emotional. If she had cursed, he could have hidden behind policy. But grace gives a guilty person nowhere to stand. The automatic doors slid open again, letting in another gust of cold air. 2 officers entered, drawn by the growing crowd outside. One of them, Sergeant Elena Ruiz, took in the scene with one practiced sweep of her eyes, cameras raised, customers silent, Mercer pale, Evelyn calm. "Daniel," she said slowly, "what happened here?" Mercer straightened instinctively. "Possible shoplifting investigation." Elena glanced at Evelyn's prescription bag, the envelope in her hand, and then at the dozens of witnesses. "Is that so?" No one answered for him. They did not need to. The silence had become testimony. The teenager with the phone spoke first. He tried to cuff her for waiting on medicine. Another customer added, "She did nothing wrong." Then another voice. "He never asked a question." Then another. "He humiliated her." Truth moves fast when fear finally leaves a room. Mercer looked toward the exit, calculating distance the way cowards often do once consequences arrive. Elena stepped slightly into his path. "Body camera on?" she asked. His pause lasted only a second, but everyone noticed. "Turn it on now," she said. He reached for the device with stiff fingers. Too late. Always too late when honesty becomes convenient. Evelyn studied him quietly, then spoke with the softness of someone who had buried greater pain than this. "Your mother wrote that kindness was the only thing worth passing on." Mercer stared at the floor. "She said she prayed you would become the kind of officer who made strangers feel safe." Karen began crying again. Even Elena looked away for a moment. "Mrs. Brooks," Mercer muttered, "I did not know." "That is the problem," Evelyn replied. "You never tried." Outside, more people gathered near the windows, faces glowing in the blue light of their screens. The story had already begun traveling farther than any apology could reach. Elena removed a small notepad from her pocket. "Officer Mercer," she said, formal now. "Hand me your badge and unit keys pending review." His head snapped up. "Here." "Yes," she answered. "Here." He hesitated, then unclipped the badge that had opened doors, ended arguments, and silenced doubts for years. Metal touched her palm with a sound no louder than a coin on glass. Yet somehow, everyone heard it. Evelyn tucked the old envelope back into her coat and held her medicine close. "Walter would have forgiven you," she said. "I am still deciding." The badge was gone, but the mark it had left on Daniel Mercer's identity remained like a pale square on his chest. He stood in the center of Green Valley Pharmacy with empty hands, shoulders rigid, eyes fixed on nothing. Around him, customers resumed breathing in slow, uncertain waves, yet no one truly returned to shopping. Some moments change the atmosphere of a room so completely that ordinary life cannot step back and right away. Sergeant Elena Ruiz spoke quietly into her radio near the entrance, requesting internal affairs and a supervisor. Her tone was calm, professional, almost gentle. That was the difference between authority and ego. One needs volume. The other does not. Evelyn Brooks adjusted the strap of her purse and rested both hands on the handle of her cane. Her medicine bag hung from one wrist. She looked tired now, not weak, just tired in the way people do after carrying dignity through another unnecessary trial. Karen Lewis approached her carefully. "Mrs. Brooks," she said, voice trembling, "I am so sorry." Evelyn studied her for a moment. "For calling him?" she asked. "Or for being wrong?" Karen lowered her eyes. "Both." Evelyn nodded once. "Then start with the second one. The first often follows." Near the checkout line, a man in a construction jacket removed his cap and stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said, "I should have said something sooner." Evelyn offered him a faint smile. "Then say something sooner next time." Shame moved through the room like a draft under the door. It touched almost everyone. The teenager who had been recording lowered his phone. "Can I delete this if you want?" he asked. Evelyn turned toward him. "No," she said softly. "Keep it. People remember what they can see." Daniel flinched at that, though no one touched him. He finally found enough voice to speak. "Mrs. Brooks, I made a mistake." It sounded rehearsed, even though he had only just formed it. Some apologies are built to escape consequences, not to meet truth. Evelyn did not rescue him from the silence that followed. A mistake, she repeated. Ordering the wrong sandwich is a mistake. Assuming I was a criminal because of how I look is a choice. Elena glanced toward Daniel, but said nothing. She did not need to. Every witness in the room had become a mirror, and he was seeing himself from angles no one had ever forced him to before. Outside, red and blue lights reflected against the windows as a police sedan pulled into the lot. More customers gathered near the glass, pretending to check messages while watching history become local news. Martin the pharmacist stepped from behind the counter carrying a paper cup of water. "For your medicine," he said to Evelyn. She accepted it with gratitude and swallowed one tablet carefully. Even that simple act carried weight now. She had come for treatment and instead been given humiliation before finally receiving what was already hers. Daniel noticed the pill bottle in her bag. "Were you waiting because you needed it now?" he asked quietly. Martin answered before she could. "Her dosage is time-sensitive. It should have been taken 15 minutes ago." Daniel's face drained further. The room did not grow louder. It grew colder. There are truths that do not need anger to punish. A tall man in plain clothes entered with the 2nd Patrol Unit, introducing himself as Lieutenant Robert Hayes. Gray at the temples, sharp-eyed, composed. He listened to Elena for less than 30 seconds before turning to Daniel. "Is there anything in this story I am going to hear online tonight that you have not told me yet?" Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. Hayes nodded as if silence were confirmation enough. "Thought so." He looked toward Evelyn and removed his gloves out of respect before offering his hand. "Mrs. Brooks, I am sorry this happened under our watch." She shook his hand once. "Then watch better," she replied. Hayes accepted the rebuke without defense. Good leaders know when correction is deserved. He then faced Daniel. "You will wait outside the store until investigators arrive." Daniel hesitated. "Sir, it is freezing." Hayes held his gaze. "So was your judgment." Customers parted as Daniel walked toward the doors. No one jeered. No one clapped. Accountability is loudest when it arrives in silence. As the doors opened and winter air rushed in, Evelyn looked at the place where he had stood and whispered words meant for no one and everyone at once. Some people only feel the cold after they lose what kept them warm. Snow gathered in thin white lines along the pharmacy windows as Daniel Mercer stood outside under the awning, hands empty, breath visible in the darkening air. For years he had been the man people moved aside for. Tonight customers inside barely glanced at him except to confirm he was still there. Humiliation is a strange mirror. It shows a person every face they ignored on the way up. Inside, Green Valley Pharmacy slowly returned to motion. Registers beeped again. Shopping carts rolled. Prescription numbers were called over the speaker in a cheerful voice that now sounded almost absurd. Life was trying to continue, but the room still carried the weight of what had happened. Lieutenant Robert Hayes spoke quietly with Sergeant Elena Ruiz near the greeting cards while 2 investigators in plain coats reviewed phone footage from witnesses willing to share it. No one needed to coordinate the truth. It had arrived, already assembled. Evelyn Brooks sat in a chair near the blood pressure machine, with her cane across her lap. Karen Lewis had brought her a fresh cup of tea from the kiosk and a warm blanket usually kept for customers feeling faint. Evelyn accepted both with the grace of someone who never confused kindness with debt. Martin the pharmacist checked the label on her bottle one more time, though it had already been checked twice. People often become extra careful after failing to be decent. "Do you need someone to drive you home?" Karen asked. Evelyn shook her head. "I drove myself here." Karen blinked. "In this weather?" "I learned to drive in Detroit in 1968, Evelyn said. "This is light work." For the first time that evening, a ripple of laughter moved through the store. Tension loosened. Even Martin smiled. Across the room, the teenager who had recorded everything approached slowly, phone tucked away now. "Mrs. Brooks, my name is Jamal," he said. "I just wanted to say my grandma would have handled it exactly like you." Evelyn looked at him warmly. "Then your grandmother sounds like a dangerous woman." He grinned. "She is." "Good," Evelyn said. "The world needs more of them." Outside, Daniel shifted from one foot to the other as sleep began tapping against the awning. He watched through the glass as strangers comforted the woman he had tried to embarrass. No training manual had prepared him for that kind of defeat. He saw Karen laughing with her. He saw Jamal listening like a student. He saw Lieutenant Hayes remove his coat and drape it over Evelyn's shoulders when the draft near the entrance reached her chair. Respect was flowing toward her from every direction, and none of it could be ordered. Hayes finally stepped outside with a folder tucked under one arm. Investigators are pulling prior complaints, he said. Daniel stared ahead. There were misunderstandings. Hayes let the winter silence answer first. There were patterns. Daniel swallowed hard. Sir, I can explain. That is usually what men say when consequences begin. Daniel looked toward the parking lot where his patrol car sat alone, lights off, authority reduced to metal and paint. My mother would be ashamed. Hayes studied him for a moment. Your mother might be disappointed. Shame is what you owe the public. Inside, Evelyn slowly stood, blanket folded neatly over the chair arm before she left it. She never took what was not hers, not even temporary comfort. Karen rushed to help, but Evelyn waved her off gently and managed on her own. That simple act drew more admiration than any speech could have. Jamal opened the door for her as she approached the exit. Cold air entered with the smell of snow and streetlights. Daniel straightened instinctively when he saw her coming. She paused just inside the threshold, medicine in one hand, cane in the other. For a moment it seemed she might pass without a word. Then she turned toward him. Your mother sent me peach cobbler every Thanksgiving, she said softly. Best crust I ever tasted. Daniel's eyes filled before he could stop them. I am sorry, he whispered. Evelyn nodded once. Be different. She stepped past him into the winter evening, moving slowly but never uncertain. Jamal hurried ahead to start her car and brush snow from the windshield. Through the falling sleet, Daniel watched strangers honor the woman he had failed to recognize. Some lessons do not come in classrooms, courtrooms, or training halls. Some arrive in the cold, after everything warm has walked away. By 9 o'clock that night, the video had reached people who had never heard of Green Valley Pharmacy and never planned to visit the town. Screens across living rooms, break rooms, apartment kitchens, and night shift security desks glowed with the same image, a gray winter evening, a retired officer standing, speechless, and an elderly woman speaking with more authority than the badge in front of her ever carried. Some stories spread because they are shocking. Others spread because people recognize them instantly. Lieutenant Robert Hayes remained at the store long after most customers left. He collected statements, thanked witnesses, and apologized more times than protocol required. Real accountability always takes longer than the mistake that made it necessary. Sergeant Elena Ruiz sat at a folding table near the pharmacy counter reviewing complaints pulled from department records. Daniel Mercer's name appeared more often than anyone liked. Traffic stop discourtesy, improper language, escalation concerns, unnecessary detainment questions later dismissed. Nothing dramatic enough to force change, everything consistent enough to reveal truth. Elena tapped the stack with one finger. Patterns, she said quietly. Hayes nodded. Patterns survive when people call them incidents. Outside, Daniel still waited beside the entrance, now without his patrol car. Another officer had driven it back to the precinct. Snow had thickened into a steady curtain, muting the parking lot under white silence. His coat was no match for the cold, but he no longer complained. Discomfort felt deserved. Every few minutes, someone exiting the store recognized him from the video and looked away, or worse, looked directly at him with calm disappointment. Anger can be resisted. Disappointment sinks deeper. Across town, Evelyn Brooks turned into the driveway of a modest brick house with warm porch lights glowing through the storm. Jamal had insisted on following behind her car to make sure she got home safely. He helped carry in her groceries and medicine, then stood awkwardly by the doorway like a grandson unsure how to leave. Thank you, young man, Evelyn said. You did more than many older men today. Jamal smiled. My grandmother would not let me hear the end of it if I did not. Evelyn laughed softly and handed him a slice of pound cake wrapped in foil from her kitchen. Then take this and tell her she raised you right. After he left, she sat at the dining room table beneath a framed photograph of Walter Brooks in a postal uniform, broad smile, gentle eyes. She placed the old envelope beside his picture and exhaled slowly. The house was quiet except for radiator clicks and wind against the window. You still cause trouble, she told the photograph. Even now. At 10:30, Daniel's phone finally rang. He answered on the first vibration. Mom, he said instinctively, forgetting for half a second that grief does not make calls. It was his sister, Angela. I saw the video, she said, voice flat with hurt. Tell me it is edited. Daniel closed his eyes. It is not. Silence stretched across the line. Then Angela spoke softly. Do you know how many times Mom talked about that family? She said she got extra years because strangers chose compassion. Daniel leaned against the brick wall outside the pharmacy. I know. No, Angela replied. Tonight you learned. Knowing would have looked different. She hung up before he could answer. Near midnight, Hayes stepped outside carrying a clipboard and a plain manila envelope. Snow covered the sidewalk in fresh inches. Internal Affairs wants you in at 7 a.m., he said. Your access is suspended effective immediately. Daniel took the envelope with numb fingers. Inside were forms, temporary instructions, and the kind of language institutions use when trust has already left the room. Sir, Daniel asked quietly, is there any chance to fix this? Hayes looked toward the falling snow, then back at the man who once thought power was permanent. Careers can sometimes be rebuilt, he said. Character has to be built first. He turned and walked away. Daniel remained alone beneath the awning, surrounded by winter and consequences. Across town, Evelyn turned off her lamp, swallowed her evening medicine, and slept peacefully. One of them lost authority that night. The other never needed it. At 7 the next morning, the police headquarters looked exactly as it always had: glass doors, gray walls, flags near the entrance, coffee scent drifting through the lobby. Institutions often appear unchanged on the day they are forced to face themselves. Daniel Mercer walked in wearing a plain coat instead of a uniform. No badge on his chest, no radio at his shoulder, no belt heavy with authority. He carried only a folder and the strange posture of a man who had lost the costume that once did most of his talking. Officers at the front desk glanced up, then down again. Some out of discomfort, some out of judgment, some because they had seen the video 3 times before breakfast. In Conference Room B, Internal Affairs had arranged a table, 2 chairs, a recording device, and a stack of printed screenshots from the pharmacy. Evidence looked different when frozen on paper. Sergeant Elena Ruiz was already seated with an investigator named Thomas Reed, a careful man with silver glasses and the patience of someone who had listened to many excuses. Daniel took his chair. Reed pressed record. Officer Mercer, he began. State your full name for the record. Daniel did. Former assignment. The word former landed harder than expected. Daniel answered quietly. Reed slid the first photo across the table. It showed Evelyn Brooks standing with her cane while Daniel reached toward his cuffs. What did you believe at this moment? Reed asked. Daniel stared at the image. Yesterday, he would have said control. Today he saw fear disguised as confidence. I believed I had probable cause, he said. Elena asked the next question without raising her voice. Based on what? Daniel searched for something solid and found only habit. The manager seemed concerned. Concern is not a crime, Elena replied. Reed slid another sheet forward, a transcript of witness statements. Multiple customers reported Mrs. Brooks was calm, cooperative, and waiting in line. Did you ask the pharmacist whether she had a prescription ready? No. Did you ask the manager what item was allegedly stolen? No. Did you observe concealment of merchandise? No. Every answer removed another brick from the wall he had hidden behind for years. By 8:15, the room felt smaller. By 8:40, Daniel stopped trying to sound impressive. Across town, Evelyn Brooks sat in her kitchen reading handwritten cards that had been slipped into her mailbox overnight. Some were from neighbors, some from strangers who had recognized the house. From an old church directory online. One card simply read, "We believe you." Another said, "Thank you for showing grace without surrender." She placed them beside Walter's photograph and shook her head with a soft smile. People do love drama, she told him. Her phone rang. It was Jamal's grandmother, Mrs. Laverne Carter, who had already invited herself over with blueberry muffins. I am bringing breakfast, Laverne announced. And I am bringing opinions. Then bring butter too, Evelyn replied. Back at headquarters, Lieutenant Robert Hayes entered conference room, carrying a sealed envelope. Reed turned off the recorder. No one needed ceremony to recognize finality. Hayes placed the envelope in front of Daniel. Administrative review is complete pending formal board confirmation, he said. Your employment is terminated effective immediately for conduct unbecoming, policy violations, and failure of duty. Daniel did not reach for the envelope right away. He looked at the tabletop grain as if answers might be hidden in the wood. After 12 years, he said. Hayes remained steady. After many warnings. Daniel swallowed. Was it only yesterday that did this? Elena answered before Hayes could. Yesterday revealed what others kept ignoring. There was no anger in her tone, only truth. Daniel finally opened the envelope. Pages of legal language, return instructions, benefits information, appeal rights. The bureaucracy of endings. He laughed once under his breath, a sound with no joy in it. One sentence from an old woman, he murmured. Hayes shook his head. No. One sentence exposed years of choices. Outside the conference room window, officers crossed the lot toward morning patrol, breath rising in the cold. Life continued, as it always does after someone discovers they were never the center of it. Daniel stood slowly, folder in hand, job gone, reflection newly unavoidable. Across town, Evelyn opened the door to Laverne Carter, and the smell of warm muffins filled the house. One building processed consequences. The other served breakfast. By the third day, the story had outgrown the town that birthed it. National commentators debated it. Morning radio hosts replayed the clip. Retired officers called in with opinions. Civil rights groups requested records. Neighbors who had never spoken to Evelyn Brooks now waved from across the street with sudden enthusiasm. Fame is often just attention arriving late to a truth that was always there. Evelyn wanted none of it. She wanted her medication on time, her porch swept, and quiet afternoons with tea. Instead, news vans parked near the corner and reporters tried to ask questions over hedges. She answered none. I am not a headline, she told Laverne Carter while arranging sugar packets in a bowl. I am a woman who needed prescriptions. Laverne snorted. Too late. You are inspirational now. Jamal sat at the kitchen table, finishing a second muffin. That is dangerous these days, he said. Evelyn smiled. So is honesty. At City Hall, a public meeting overflowed into the hallway. Residents stood shoulder to shoulder, holding printed screenshots from the pharmacy video. Some came angry. Some came tired. Some came because they had stories of their own and had finally found a room willing to hear them. Lieutenant Robert Hayes sat beside the mayor and police chief under fluorescent lights that made everyone look older. One by one, citizens approached the microphone. A teacher described being followed home after a traffic stop. A veteran spoke of being searched outside his own apartment building. A nurse said she had stopped calling for help because being doubted felt worse than waiting alone. None of them raised their voices. Pain does not always shout. Sometimes it testifies. Then Evelyn Brooks entered quietly through the rear doors, cane tapping softly on the tile. The room noticed in waves. Conversations thinned. Heads turned. Cameras lifted. She had not planned to speak, but Jamal had driven her there after saying, sometimes silence needs backup. Laverne sat beside him in the second row wearing a church hat sharp enough to command order by itself. The mayor stood awkwardly as Evelyn approached the microphone. Mrs. Brooks, thank you for coming, he said. She nodded. Do not thank me yet. A few nervous laughs moved through the crowd. She placed both hands on the podium and looked at no notes. I am not here because one officer embarrassed me, she began. I am here because too many people found that moment familiar. The room became still in the serious way only truth can cause. When disrespect becomes routine, shock only visits those who were never paying attention. Even Hayes lowered his eyes for a moment. I do not need revenge, she continued. I need systems that do not require elderly women to become lessons. Applause rose, then swelled, then stood on its feet. She waited for it to pass. And for the record, she added, I still have not received an apology from the pharmacy rewards program for delaying my points. The laughter that followed broke tension like sunlight through clouds. Humor, in wise hands, can carry justice farther than rage. Across town, Daniel Mercer sat in his small apartment at a kitchen table cluttered with unopened mail, disciplinary forms, and a cold cup of coffee he no longer remembered making. The television showed clips from the City Hall meeting. He turned it off, then back on, then off again. Running from reflection is exhausting when mirrors are everywhere. He opened a drawer and found a Christmas card from his mother, written years earlier in looping handwriting. Be kind first, it read. Everything else can be corrected later. He stared at the sentence until the words blurred. Back at City Hall, the chief announced mandatory bias review, complaint reopening procedures, and civilian oversight proposals that had somehow seemed impossible before embarrassment made them urgent. People clapped politely. They clapped louder when Evelyn turned to leave. Jamal rose to help her down the steps. but she waved him off and managed with practiced strength. As she passed Hayes, he said quietly, "You changed this city." Evelyn kept walking. "No," she replied. "The city changed itself once it was forced to watch." Outside, snowmelt dripped from gutters under a clear afternoon sky. Some storms passed quickly. Others cleaned things. Spring arrived slowly that year, as if the town itself needed time to thaw. Snowbanks shrank into gray piles, then disappeared. Storefront windows opened a little earlier. People lingered on sidewalks longer. At Green Valley Pharmacy, the automatic doors still sighed the same way, the fluorescent lights still hummed, and the line for prescriptions still formed every afternoon at 5. Yet nothing inside felt quite the same. A framed sign now stood near the entrance beside baskets of sale items and seasonal candy. It read, "Dignity is not optional." Customers noticed it every time they walked in. Some smiled. Some nodded. Some looked away because reminders can sting when they are deserved. Karen Lewis had kept her job, but not her old habits. She greeted every customer by name when possible. She asked questions before making assumptions. She listened longer than convenience required. Martin the pharmacist said she had become kinder and more efficient, which in his view bordered on miraculous. Jamal now worked weekends stocking shelves after school. He claimed it was for extra money. Everyone knew it was because he liked hearing Evelyn tell stories near the blood pressure machine on Thursdays. She still came once a month, always at 5:20, always with her coat buttoned neatly, and her cane polished brighter than some people polish their reputations. When she entered, the line often parted without being asked. Respect, once learned honestly, tends to become habit. Daniel Mercer spent those same months in quieter places. He completed required counseling sessions, attended hearings no cameras covered, and submitted applications to jobs that never called back. In grocery stores, he noticed people first now. In parking lots, he held doors. In waiting rooms, he sat with ordinary patients among ordinary strangers. Humility had introduced him to the world everyone else had always lived in. One Tuesday morning, he stood outside a community center holding a cardboard box of donated canned goods. A volunteer coordinator pointed him toward the pantry shelves. "Stack those by expiration date," she said. No salute. No title. No deference. Just work. Daniel nodded and did it carefully. Across the room, an older woman laughed at something during a knitting class. The sound made him think of his mother, then of Evelyn, then of all the warnings kindness had given him before consequences had to. Some lessons begin only after punishment ends. In late April, Green Valley Pharmacy hosted a neighborhood health fair in the parking lot. Free screenings, coffee, folding tables, local vendors, balloons for children, blood pressure checks under white tents. Lieutenant Robert Hayes attended in plain clothes and shook hands without speeches. Laverne Carter brought pound cake and opinions in equal measure. Jamal ran extension cords like he owned the place. Karen fussed over tablecloths. Martin corrected everyone's pronunciation of cholesterol for no reason anyone could explain. Evelyn Brooks arrived 10 minutes late and became the center of the event within 30 seconds. She disliked attention but tolerated usefulness. She sat beneath a canopy signing donor registration cards for residents who wanted to honor Walter Brooks after hearing the story. By noon, more than 200 people had registered. "Your husband is still saving people," Jamal said quietly. Evelyn looked at the line of neighbors waiting with clipboards and pens. "He always was," she replied. Near 1 o'clock, Daniel approached from the far edge of the lot carrying 2 unopened cases of bottled water for the volunteers. Conversations softened as people recognized him. He set the cases down without fanfare and turned to leave. Evelyn called his name before he reached the sidewalk. He stopped. The crowd watched in the respectful silence reserved for moments no one wants to damage. Daniel walked back slowly. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, "I did not come to bother you." "Good," she answered. "You finally learned quickly." A few people laughed. She studied him for a long second. He looked smaller now, though perhaps only more accurate. "Are you working?" she asked. "Trying to," he said. "Serving meals at the center. Delivering groceries to seniors on Fridays." Evelyn nodded. "Keep doing things no one applauds." Daniel swallowed hard. "Do you forgive me?" She glanced at the registration table, the line of neighbors, the bright spring sky above the parking lot. "Forgiveness is not a switch," she said. "It is a road. Walk well enough, and maybe one day you will notice I am standing there too." Tears gathered in Daniel's eyes, but he did not hide them. He simply nodded and carried empty boxes toward the trash bins. Evelyn turned back to the waiting line and signed another donor card with steady hands. He once believed power lived in a badge. She knew all along it lived in what a person gives away.